Welcome back, confirmands, for part 2 of our look at this fifth petition of the Lord's Prayer. That is, lead us not into temptation. And if you remember last time, we talked about just that word temptation and what it means. That temptation is that choice that is always before us to trust God and His will or to do things that go against it, right? So temptation is not just that desire to do something stupid or wrong, but it's actually a choice to choose to go and walk God's way or to walk our own way. And that's kind of at the heart of this petition. Today, we're going to take a look and unpack where those causes of temptation come from. But first, as always, you'll need to have with you your catechism and also your Bible as well, and also your workbook as well. And you'll want to turn to page 154 in your workbook. Now, as we think about this idea of temptation, last time we talked about those different things that we're tempted by. So we looked at money, and we looked at those images of drugs, and those media, and the computer, and music, and all those kind of things. Now, those are things that we might be tempted by, and we could probably have a really long list of things that we're tempted by. But what are the actual causes of temptation? What are those things that put those items in our life that try to lure us away from God? In our catechism, it often talks about three causes of temptation, three things that try to pull us away from God our Father. And it goes like this: Satan, the world, and our sinful flesh. And I want to talk about all three of those in just a little bit, and you can work on this more in your workbook as well. In your workbook, there's on page 154, there's a trident, kind of a three-pronged spear. And it details each one of these. And so the first one I want to talk about is the flesh. What is the flesh? Well, an easy way to think about what the flesh is, it's when we are tempted to do things that feel good rather than to do what is right. Do things that we want to do because it gives us pleasure, as opposed to doing things that God wishes us to do. So, one example of the temptations of the flesh would be things like, wanting to use drugs or alcohol to get drunk, to numb us against the pain of the world, or just to feel good. That would be a temptation of the flesh. Another example of this might be giving in to our desires to have sex before we're married. That would be a temptation of the flesh. And another one I think all of us have is that desire to be lazy and be unproductive instead of doing what God has called us to do, wanting to play a few hours of video games before you get to your work, or probably instead of doing your work. Those are all temptations of the flesh. Doing things that feel good rather than doing what is actually right. The next cause that the Catechism gives us is the devil, Satan himself. And while he can tempt us with things as he did with Jesus, when he offered him power and kingdoms, sometimes he tempts us with lies and with half-truths, like he did with Adam and Eve in the garden. Do you remember what the snake said to Adam and Eve? Did God really say this? It was a lie. He was trying to get them in a trap. Or you can think of some of the other lies that Satan might say to you. You're not good enough. God doesn't love you. Everybody hates you. You have to do this all by yourself. You're all alone. Things in life will never get better. And these are lies that Satan tells us to put us into despair, to lead us away from God and His trust, and trusting in Him and His promises. And I'm sure you can think of a lot of other lies that you hear Satan say. But lastly, the world also tempts us too, and this can take all kinds of different forms. It might be like trying to be like your friends when they're doing something wrong, just so you fit in. Or it might be like advertisements that, especially this time of year, that try to get you to buy things that you don't particularly need, that aren't really useful. It might be the way that, for instance, romance in love is portrayed in movies. Or it might be the way in which our world focuses so much on money and material things, as if that's the most important thing, and not a good relationship with God and with those that God has placed in our lives. Now, those are all kinds of temptations that the world seeks to give us. You know, temptation surrounds us from our sinful flesh and the world and from Satan, and it can seem hopeless that we might succumb to it. But take a look at page 154 in your workbook and write down there what Paul says to us in his letter in 1 Corinthians. This is what Paul said. No temptation has overcome you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with every temptation he will provide a way of escape so that you may be able to endure it. You know, God knows what you're going through. I mean, Jesus, when he was born, he went out and the devil right away went to tempt him for 40 days in the wilderness. God knows what you're going through. And he has a promise that he will be there with you as you face any and every temptation, and he will provide a way for you to endure by relying on his grace and his strength and his power. So, what are those three causes of temptation? Satan, the world, and our sinful flesh. All right, so we're going to talk next time about how God gives us his weapons and his strength to fight against those temptations. See you then.